Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Pits of Metal Chaos. This is your host, Dave. I got a line special guest, drummer Sebastian from Tzimani. How's it going, Sebastian?
It's going really good, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Oh, no problem. I know you told me you got a lot of news to share. Look, go ahead and share all this news you got for the band.
Yeah. All right. So I think the biggest news that we got to share is that we just announced a tour. It's going to be our biggest tour to date. It's looking like it's going to start March 26th in San Diego, and we'll be closing everything down April 27th in Pasadena or Los Angeles, depending on who you speak with. But yeah, man, we are really excited for this tour. Biggest one of our career, and we're hoping it works out for us in the end.
Now, who are you guys going out with?
We are currently touring solo, but we've made a lot of good connections over the last few years in the touring circuit. We're playing with a lot of really good bands out in the local scene. So, but right now we are just doing everything solo.
Awesome. So, what other news you got?
So the tour is going to be in promotion of the expanded edition release of our EP. So we released the EP, the self-titled EP, back in 2018 March, and we've done extensive touring on that release. We've already played over 100 shows on it, and we recently signed a deal with Diabolic Might Records 666, an independent label based out of Germany, who will be re-releasing our EP for European distribution. And we decided to add a couple of little extras to make it worthwhile, give it some sort of refreshed look. It'll come with 2 cover songs as well as a new single.
Now, who are you guys covering?
We haven't disclosed it yet, but just for the sake of this interview, we're going to be covering Night People by Dio.
Awesome.
And Dr. Rocker by Wasp.
Wasp, awesome, man.
Thanks.
So now, give me a history of this band now.
Yeah, so my brother and I, we were in a band for a long time in San Diego. They're called Malison, and we started it about, I want to say, 2013, early 2014. We both left that band, I want to say, around August, September 2016. And then we went on kind of like a personal music hiatus. And right around January, February of 2017, we decided to get back together, kind of converge on some of the musical ideas that we left off with from the old project, and kind of talk about, what we wanted to do musically wise, professionally. And then right around like April of 2017, we had made the formal announcement of the new band, kind of like picking up where we had left off, and we really hit the ground running from there. We announced the band in 2017, released a single, and we actually released 2 singles over the course of a few months, and before even releasing anything, we compiled the demo, and we went on I believe 13 or 14 date tour by September, October of 2017, and then ever since then, it's been pretty much touring on the EP that we released in 2018 March.
Oh, that's pretty cool, man. So now, when you go on tour, you guys got other musicians with you guys?
Yeah, so the first tour we have ever did, the September, October of 2017, we named that tour the Overdrive Tour. We actually had a full package on that tour. We had a bassist who was really awesome. His name was Mateo. We actually had a photographer with us at the time. We also had a merch guy, and things were pretty good. It was a decent tour. A lot of learning experiences on that tour, but things didn't really work out with the bassist, and he had different expectations. So, no harm, no worries. It was a good run. But we decided to just keep things, within us as a 2-piece, and we realized that we can cut a lot of costs. We could, save ourselves from a lot of, just like internal issues by slimming everything down to 2 guys. So for the bulk of 2018 and pretty much the bulk of 2019, we performed as a 2-man band. So that's where we are right now. We actually performed live, I think, in October, November with a bassist. His name is John. He's a really good guy. He does a lot for the scene here in San Diego. And right now we are talking with a couple of guys looking to see if they'd be down to jump on this big run with us. But if it doesn't work out, it's just going to be us 2. We're pretty professional, and we've done it for over 2 years now. So, that's pretty much all I got to say on that. A 2-man band, if it doesn't work out, we'll add a bassist if it does.
Awesome. So now, what is the meaning of the name of the band?
We get asked this quite a bit, and I like to explain it. So, Tzimani is pronounced Tzimani. It means the number 2 in a native Mexican language called the Purépecha language. It's a native Mexican tribe that were never really conquered by the Aztec and the Spanish. So my father's bloodline is directly linked to that tribe. So after we had left our old band, we decided on trying to come up with something original, something unique, maybe something just to pay homage to our blood. And my brother at the time, we had essentially gone over 100, 150 band names. I think I still have the documents where I just wrote all these band names down. I wrote anything that came up to mind. And Tzimani, he actually proposed it because he ended up doing some research. And we ended up finding the dictionary that was a translation of like a Mexican college student. He used that as his PhD dissertation. And we looked it up and we saw the language, we saw the word, and the number 2 meant in that language is Tzimani. And I was just like, you know what, I think that just might work. So we hit up our artist, Ryan Bartlett. He's based out of Los Angeles. And we asked him to make a sketch of what he thought. And then we ended up liking it enough, and then we just ran with it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, just it symbolizes the number 2, and our band logo also represents a lot of duality, a lot of 2-ness to it. So yeah, we're pretty proud of the band name, and we like to talk about it too.
Now, what's your history in music? What age did you start playing the drums?
My history with music, I want to say it started when I was in 4th or 5th grade. I played in a school band, like a symphony. Or I guess not a symphony, because that's the improper word. We played in a concert band. So I learned how to play flute. So I want to say I was, however you are old in 5th grade. I want to say like 10 or 11. My brother was in 4th grade, and we both were in the concert band. We picked up an instrument. But I didn't pick up drums until I turned, I want to say like 11 or 12. My dad had an old drum set that he played in the band back in the 80s during the club days, and he ended up keeping it for many, many years. And just one day I had asked him, can you show me a couple things or two? And that's where I picked it up, and I played drums, on and off for about 6 or 7 years. Never really got serious with it, and then when I got into high school, formed a cover band with my other brother, and we kind of just started jamming things along, and that's how it all started. And my brother's story is very similar. We got started in the concert band, playing in bands of that kind of style of music, classical music. Concert band music, like when we were 10, 11, and then we didn't start picking up like the electric instruments until 12, 13, 14 years old.
Now, what kind of bands did your dad play in? Were like metal bands or rock bands?
It's really funny because I'm glad you asked that. I actually didn't really grow up listening to a lot of heavy metal or heavy music in general. My dad in the 80s, early 90s, maybe all the way up into the late 90s, early 2000s, he played in a lot of Mexican music bands. So stuff like romantic music, Mexican cumbias, norteño music, stuff like that. He was in bands with his family, his friends, playing in nightclubs every single weekend. And my mother actually listened to a lot of smooth jazz, soft rock, funk, disco. So we pretty much grew up listening to Mexican music and disco music. And it wasn't until I believe my brother, he was in middle school, like some girl that, he was really good friends with, put on some headphones over his ears, and she said, listen to this. And it was Iron Maiden's self-titled album. And that's pretty much how it all started.
Wow. So now, when you guys used to play covers, what did you used to play, like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and all that stuff?
Man, starting off, like I said, we didn't really get really into heavier music. I think our good buddy of ours, his name is Steven, he listened to a band. He was really, really big in a band called Coheed and Cambria. And, like I said, we hadn't really been exposed to a lot of heavy music. So he came over one day. He's like, my big brother showed me this CD. Like, let's check it out. And then we ended up listening to it. And we listened to stuff like Coheed and Cambria. And that kind of led into, like, listening to stuff like System of a Down. And then by the time we had grown up, we were all 15, 16, 17 years old. We were listening to stuff like Dio, Iron Maiden. I think, like, Dragon Force was blowing up on the radio at the time with Through the Fire and the Flames. So, like, that was a really big popular song. And by the time we had formed our cover band, we were playing, Coheed and Cambria songs. I think we had some Iron Maiden tunes, a lot of glam rock stuff we started covering, like Warrant. I don't think we played Poison, but I think we rehearsed it a couple of times, and Scorpions and stuff like that. So, we started off in like the poppy, punky, alternative stuff, and then, like, by the time we all got into our later teen years, we were listening to, like, the classics, Priest, Dio, Iron Maiden, and covering those songs.
So now, what bands would be you and your brother's big influences nowadays for this band?
My brother actually listens to a lot of classic rock. So he likes to listen to, he's a huge fan of Neil Sean of Journey. He loves the way he plays the guitar. So I would say the way he songwrites, kind of, he really enjoys the catchiness and the phraseology of, like, what Journey does. He loves Def Leppard. Iron Maiden is obviously a big one. Judas Priest. This quite. I mean, I wish he was here, but this is more of a question directed to him. And he listens to those types of music. I like to keep up with more modern music. I'm a big fan of the new wave of traditional heavy metal scene. So is he. But a lot of the stuff that we pay homage to, I guess, on a more organic level for his songwriting, because he's the main songwriter and the main contributor to everything that we do. It's like more of like the classic oriented, Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Journey, and also we kind of pay a lot of respect to more modern sounding bands as we grew up listening to, like, Coheed and Cambria, Dragon Force. I mean, I know it doesn't really sound like super, true to school, because we weren't really exposed to that at all growing up as kids. But we didn't we didn't start getting into, like, more underground stuff until, even just a few years ago. So I want to say just, like, more of, like, the more mainstream, heavier artists is, like, what really consists of, the songwriting process, the inspiration for the music. And I think that kind of helps with keeping some sort of originality as well when you kind of incorporate a lot of classic sounding music with more modern, heavier tunes.
Now, do you have any drummers that influenced you?
Oh, man, dude, yeah, I grew up, I was a huge fan of Dream Theater when I was in high school, and I was a big progressive heavy metal fan. Dream Theater was my jam. Like, I got exposed to it when I was around, I want to say, like 15 or 16, and that's such a formative part of my life. So Mike Portnoy was the man. Like, he was playing stuff that I couldn't even dream of when I was a kid. And, like, I grew up learning how to play Mexican rock music and Mexican cumbia music, Mexican dance music. So I had no understanding of like what a basic 4/4 rock beat was. Groove into dancey types of stuff. So when I got exposed to Dream Theater, like Mike Portnoy was the man. And as I got older, I got exposed to like heavier, like more mainstream sounding bands like Between the Buried and Me. So Blake Richardson is a huge inspiration of mine. He sounds like an octopus with the way he plays, and extended drum fills and stuff like that. So I take a lot of inspiration. So yeah, we'll probably say like Mike Portnoy was one of the biggest ones that I first got inspired to. Nico McBrain. I mean, I remember picking up my first drum set at a Guitar Center, and I was completely adamant that I did not want to pick up a double bass pedal, because Nico McBrain of Iron Maiden, he never played with one. So I was just like, well, I want to pay true to school of Iron Maiden. He was one of the biggest guys that I listened to a lot, and thankfully, this is for another story. But the drummer, the guy that actually sold me the drum set, sold me a double pedal, and he insisted that I pick one up because if I ever got into it, then it'll be versatile. And I thank him. His name is Norm Legia, actually the drummer for Psychotic Waltz, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, I mean, I would probably say the big three right now growing up was probably like Mike Portnoy, Nico McBrain, and Blake Richardson. Like, they were really big inspirations of me playing drums and kind of growing with that sound too.
So what kind of drum kit are you currently playing?
Right now, just to give you some history, I played on a Pearl Vision maple set. I played on that kit for like 12, 13 years, toured on it a few times. But my current touring rig is a Thomas Starr Classic Birch Bubinga set.
Now, how many pieces is that?
How many pieces? I have 2 bass drums, 3 toms, and a snare drum.
Now, for drums, you were self-taught, or did you take any lessons at all?
Oh man, that's a good one. So I was actually a self-taught drummer. I mean, obviously, like my dad, like I asked him, like, hey, teach me one thing, and then he showed me like a basic, Mexican rock beat, Mexican cumbia beat, and I picked that up, and after I learned one beat, I showed it to him, like, hey, look, I can play this, and then he's like, all right, try to play this, and then try to play this, and then a couple months later, you sit on the drum set for a little while, and then you start kind of picking up, like, or you want to try to start exploring your skill set. So we were listening to like Iron Maiden and stuff at the time, so I was trying to emulate and copy some songs, learn some songs. I got into like European forms of power metal when I was also in high school, so I was trying to like learn how to play double bass at the time. But yeah, like, it's really, I think it's interesting, I guess, for me personally, because I stopped playing the drums for almost 5-6 years when I went to school, and I didn't take my first real drum lesson until I had turned, I want to say 24, 25, and I took maybe 23, I can't really remember. No, back in 2016, so I was, gosh, that's so long ago. I was 25, and I took my first drum lesson with a guy named Rory Packard. He's like a phenomenal drummer here in the San Diego metal scene. He hasn't been as active, but that was my first real lesson, and I pay a lot of respect to him because a lot of my personal development, my drumming skill set kind of can go back to that 1, 2, 3 lessons that we had. So, yeah, basically I grew up self-taught, with the direction of my dad kind of helping in every now and then, and kind of stopped playing for a long time, and then I started the band Malison and played drums again. Wasn't really serious with it, and then once we left the band, I'm like, hey, it's time for me to nut up or shut up. Kind of humbled myself, and I contacted Rory, and I'm like, hey, like let's sit down for a few hours and see what we can go over, and then the rest is history with that. So
now, how many cymbals do you have on your kit?
I want to say I'll use 3 cymbals as my crash cymbals, and they are A-custom mediums. I got a 17, an 18, and 19. I also use a Zildjian A-custom medium 21-inch ride, and I use 14-inch A-custom hats.
Now, another question I got is, how did you How did you guys get picked to play on Blades of Steel Festival?
Okay, so we met. So the guy that puts everything together, his name is Randy.
Yeah, Randy
And
Kastner.
we just through luck, honestly, we met Randy through Bob Byrne, who manages the Legions of Metal Festival, and he coordinates the whole thing. So, yeah, let me explain. So we met Bob actually just kind of offhand on the last tour that we did, the 2019 tour that we did called the Final Hour Tour. The last show of the tour we played in Los Angeles, and a woman by the name of Jen came up to us after the show, and she's like, "Hey, you guys are awesome. You guys are super professional. I got a buddy that books shows out in Chicago. Like, I'll let him know about you guys, and he does a lot of festival stuff. So maybe he can get you guys on a festival." And at the time, like we got really cool with Jen. Like, she was really nice to us, and we got to chat at the show. But I can't tell you how many times we've had that conversation with different people all over the United States, all over Canada. So, we didn't really, take it as face value. So I want to say maybe like a month later, a few weeks later, we got a message from Bob, and he said that a woman by the name of Jen had reached out to him. And he said that, that we were a good band, and he was excited to have us on. He had listened to the music, and just through blind luck, a band that was supposed to play couldn't no longer for the Legions of Metal Fest last year. So he's like, "Hey man, like, I could fly you if you guys want to fly out. I really can't pay you, but I can get you guys a room with a guy that he's going to be driving around a lot of the folks." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, dude. We're just down to play. We've never played a festival before." So we show up, and we get picked up, and then we end up meeting Randy later that day, and he was the guy that we shared a room with. So we ended up getting to know him. He said that he liked the music, and we gave him a record for helping us, get around the fest. And about 8 months later, when I'm looking to book this tour, the one that just we announced, I hit him up like, "Hey man, you got any space? You got any space on this fest?" And he got back to me. He's like, "Yeah, man, if you guys want to play the Sunday, I could slide you guys right in." So I know it's a bit long-winded, but I like to kind of, provide context to the situation, but it was really just through a series of incredibly fortunate events, and we kind of lucked out how we got in touch with Randy, and, he does a lot for the Wisconsin metal scene, so we were absolutely stoked to get on it, and a lot of big bands on that bill.
I can't wait to see him.
So you're pretty excited to play with the legendary Satan?
Yeah, man, they put out this record, Cruel Magic. And, like I had said, we didn't really grow up listening to a lot of, like, the old school, more true forms of metal. So that was really, like, my first exposure to Satan. And unfortunately, we missed it when they were touring and they played here in San Diego. But when we found out that they were playing Blades of Steel, I had to ask Randy. I'm like, "Hey, man, like, we want to play this fest." And there's so much history involved, a lot of great bands that are active in the circuit, active in the scene. And so the fact that we're playing the same night that they are it's just an absolute pleasure, an absolute honor.
Yeah, my wife's very excited to see you guys on that show.
Man, that's awesome. It's a really stacked lineup. I think it's Bewitcher, Night Demon, Haunt, and Satan.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I said Bewitcher.
Yeah, Bewitcher's a killer band, man. We were actually really fortunate to play with them a couple of times. We played with them once in El Paso, Texas, and then once in Fresno. Great guys. I met them when they were touring on their first album, like on their first real big tour. Just through happenstance. I met Andy, the bassist, Andreas. Long story short, our tour van broke down in West Texas, San Angelo, and we had to take a car rental to go back home after the tour finished. A week later, I take that car rental right back to San Angelo, and on the way there, we stopped in I stopped in Odessa, Texas, and the promoter that put on our show in El Paso was like, "Yeah, come by. I have a show going on here. A band called Bewitcher from Portland. Just come check it out." And I met the guys, and we ended up, maintaining contact, and we played a couple shows with them, and fucking awesome dudes.
Now, do you guys have a pretty big fan base out there in California?
Yes and no. Like, since we haven't put out a lot of music, since we announced the band, I want to say like we've been playing the same show for a little while, so the fan base is there when like a real big show happens. But if it's kind of like a smaller, like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday kind of show, like not a lot of people come out, but that's just kind of the nature of the underground and heavy metal business. I mean, we played LA several times before we actually broke through and found a fan base there. So, it's growing, man. Like, and if it wasn't, then, we wouldn't be doing this. And, obviously your home base is where it's at, on a, regional level. Like, and I had mentioned to you that, we played our first show June of 2017, and then our second show, we were already starting a tour. So we hadn't really played a lot regionally, to help develop our fan base, in San Diego. And a lot of the fan base that we had at those shows were, leftovers from the old band that we were in. So, but it takes time to build a heavy fan base, man. Like, I know bands here that have been around for 5-6 years in the scene, and they still have difficulty selling 20 tickets to a show. But that's just kind of the nature of the San Diego metal scene. I mean, it's huge. It's huge in the sense that there's a lot of different genres, and it kind of scatters everything. So, but yeah, man. I mean, since we played our first show, like I'm pretty happy with our fan base here. It's growing. We meet new people every day that message us on our website, message us Instagram, Facebook that they like the music and they're coming out to the next show.
So, what genre would you categorize as your band?
Oh man. We've tried to build ourselves many different ways. I think the first genre we ever built ourselves was the new wave of American heavy metal. But we realized that moniker had already been taken up by bands like Lamb of God, Killswitch Engaged. So we realized we were kind of shooting ourselves in the foot when we were playing shows, and we kind of sounded a little more old school. But you're right, like and then we started calling ourselves traditional metal band, new wave of traditional heavy metal. That was something that we've technically built ourselves, but we try to call ourselves heavy rock, heavy metal, but right now we're kind of rocking the trad metal moniker, but a lot of the stuff that we kind of have in the works is kind of like moving away from that into like, but it's kind of hard to say. So I guess right now at this point in time, end of January 2020, traditional metal works for us. It's kind of like how we've built ourselves for the last few years. We've played primarily traditional metal festivals. Legions of Metal. We're playing Blades of Steel. We're playing like a progressive heavy metal festival out in Vancouver. USPM prog metal, but yeah, man, I think that works for me. If it works for you.
Yeah. So now, Sebastian, what's your fondest memory of Tzimani so far?
Oh man, there's so many fondest. Let me see here. Let me think about it for a second, because obviously for being in an underground heavy metal band, there's a lot of ups, plenty of downs. But I want to say fondest. I guess I have two, and one of them is like pretty negative, but it has a history to it, and the other one's really positive. So I'll start with the negative one. So like on our very first tour, our van broke down out in the middle of nowhere, West Texas, Ozona, Texas to be precise, and we ended up paying to flat tow our vehicle 2 hours to the nearest big city that could even work on our vehicle, because we were driving a European engine diesel. So to find someone that could work on both of those was incredibly difficult in Ozona. So we flat towed it all the way to San Angelo, and we got the car repaired there by the good old folks at Rick Henry's. And we actually met a guy who rented us the U-Haul to go back home. And he's like, hey, I actually put shows together here. I can put you into contact with some guys that book shows. And after that interaction on our very next tour, we played San Angelo. And just about every single tour we've ever played, so we've done, I think, like 5 or 6 tours. We played St. Angelo every tour but one. And we actually plan on hitting it again on this tour. So it's kind of like through a series of unfortunate events, we turn it into a positive. And it's kind of nice to see that even a lot more bands now are touring through St. Angelo, which is great. But so, yeah, that's one of them. We basically turned a super negative into a positive. But the other one I want to say is when we first really tried to break into Canada. You know, we played Canada back in 2018. We were well received. We sold a lot of merch, made a lot of good friends. The guys in Gatekeeper, we played at their album release party for East of Sun, and we were one of the opening bands. And we lucked out. And on our next tour, the next time we tried to break into Canada, when we hit Calgary, you know, it was phenomenal. We showed up, and everybody treated us like a real serious band. You know, up until that point, you know, we were just kind of like an underground heavy metal band, kind of just playing shows to play shows. A lot of the shows were pretty small. But, you know, we hit Calgary, like, I want to say like 80, 90, upwards, maybe 100 people showed up. The opening band they were Hrom. They brought a ton of people. We made a ton of connections at that show. One of the guys in Hrom is in the band Traveler. And then the guys in Traveler, you know, we just got to meet everybody. We got to meet the Riot City guys there. Got to meet one of the kingpins of the Calgary scene, and his name is Dan. But man, we were actually like treated like a legitimate touring metal band, and we were well received, and the night was epic. So I really hold true to Calgary for kind of like showing us that, you know, for all the downs in the music industry, there are ups, and you know we're really, really close friends with a lot of the Canadians up there. You know, Traveler, Riot City, Prom, Gatekeeper, like all those guys. You know, they were probably like the first real bands that kind of like, you know, gave us credit where credit was due in a lot of ways. You know, since we hadn't really broken through into the American trad metal scene very well. So yeah, man, like it was awesome. I remember speaking with Jan of the band Hrom for about an hour outside of the show during load-in, and we were just kind of catching up and, you know, kind of talking about our lives and how we kind of got to that point. It was like a super serious, super deep conversation. And yeah, man, Calgary 2019. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. Now, can you think of one of your most funny or embarrassing times on stage?
On stage?
Yeah, during a concert, during one of your shows.
Embarrassing. So sometimes we get lumped into shows like stoner rock shows. We played a show once with a band called Mothership, and so we were the opening band, and at the time we were doing the 2-man band jam, and I have live backing tracks for, you know, the bass guitar because we don't have one. So I pre-programmed everything, and we played, and I guess I might have like missed a beat, and in the middle of the song, like we just fell apart. Like the bass was doing one thing, we were completely off, like, and then it was a train wreck, and that was the first song. So my brother like said, "Cut!" Looked at me, and then he like kind of gave me the look, like, "Are we good to go?" And then he turned around, and he's like, "All right, man, like, let's kick it off." And the crowd had no idea what was going on. Like, obviously internally, we both know that we both epically screwed up. But I guess to the audience, we were sound checking or something, and like nobody ever made mention of it. But, you know, personally, that was a pretty embarrassing professional moment. We played a show once out in Yuma. Same thing happened. Like, I actually told my brother I'm going to make edits to the backing track so that this does not happen again. And during the sequencing of the metronome and the live backing tracks, I made an error like mid-song during the programming. And when we arrived at that point, like where the bass drop I'm sorry, the guitar solo starts, everything was out of sync, out of funk, but we actually finished playing the song, and the promoter at the end of the show, he's like, "Hey man, was something kind of funny at the end of the first song?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we screwed up."
Wow.
But yeah, other than that, I mean, I don't think we've had a lot of real big, funny, screw up moments like that. We've been playing the same show for almost 2 years now, 3 years. And thankfully, things have worked out well, and I guess we're thankful for that.
Yeah. Now, currently, are you guys working on any new material?
Yeah. So with so I guess to go back 3 years, my brother had written down a bunch of songs. I mean, he wrote maybe like 8-10 songs. And, we talked about it. At the time, he wanted to put out a full-length record. And I said, you know what, let's do the EP. And that took a lot of convincing on a professional level to start again with an EP. And so we had a lot of songs kind of, in the oven that have been sitting, unperformed live. They're written, I have the MIDI files to all the songs, and we've always said, like, after the EP we're going to put the songs out on the full length. So a lot of the stuff that we've actually planned on releasing, has been kind of just sitting at bay, and we've never really performed it live. It's really, really good stuff. Like, he's really proud of it. I'm super excited to release it. But yeah, man, like, to be honest with you, we pretty much went like on a mini hiatus after the Final Hour tour. We were catching up on life. A lot of personal growth happened last year after the big tour that we did, and not a lot happened within the band, but a lot of like ideas are starting to formulate, like with the songwriting process, and we have about 3 or 4 songs right now, kind of in the works, kind of getting orchestrated, like finding the composition to work through it, and we're excited to release, those songs, in a package with some of the stuff that we've written, 3 years ago.
Cool. Now, Sebastian, who are your top favorite bands of a lifetime?
Man, that's a difficult question, but I can give you like maybe my Mount Rushmore of heavy metal albums.
All right.
Like, I'm a huge fan of Queensryche. I think Operation Mindcrime is just an eternal masterpiece. A lot of bands in like the old school heavy metal scene, they like Queensryche, but they, listen to the EP, they listen to the first album. But I mean, I think Mindcrime is just something that will endure the test of time. Generations, 20, 30, 40 years from now, we'll look back into it and, find it an essential piece of heavy metal history. King Diamond is also a really big, I love King Diamond. Abigail is a huge influence, with how I've arrived to heavy metal. So Queensryche, King Diamond, Wasp, the epic night in Calgary. Dan, we ended up staying at his place, and he showed me Wasp. And obviously we had known about Wasp. A lot of the hits, like I Want to Be Somebody, Animal.
Yeah.
But he actually played some of the deeper stuff, like stuff from the Crimson Idol. And so yeah, that album is actually probably one of my top, if not top 2 best album. That's my favorite album of all time. The Crimson Idol by Wasp is it's epic, emotional, super heavy. I mean, even in the context of when it was released, like the early 90s, I mean, who would have thought that, Blackie Lawless could put something out like that under all of that changes in the music industry? And I like a lot of, like, I got introduced to bands like the Rods. When I went on tour with Road Rash, I played drums for them, and it kind of exposed me to a lot of, older bands that were, super underground bands, but, have a lot of relative staying power within the scene. So the Rods are huge. I'm a big fan of those guys. Yeah, man. Queensryche, Wasp. King Diamond, Merciful Fate. Those are, I don't sound like too hip, like with all these super underground bands, but those are some of my favorites.
Now, what do you think of a band like Slayer?
Slayer?
Yeah.
Slayer.
I never really heard much from them, so I'll refrain from saying anything. Like they have their place in history, and I don't really know too much about them, to be honest with you. Like, I think I might have heard one song, like in passing, hanging out with some friends a long time ago. But no, I can't really. I can't say much.
So what do you think of thrash metal in general? You listen to any thrash metal at all?
Yeah, like when I was growing up, we got exposed to stuff like when we discovered heavy metal, like in our teenage years. We started listening to like heavier stuff, like Megadeth. My cousin was a huge Metallica fan. But we didn't really. I personally did not listen to a lot of thrash metal growing up. Like, obviously I've seen Megadeth a few times, and they're pretty epic. I saw Anthrax when I was like 14 or 15, and they were one of the best live performing bands. Personally, thrash metal, like I arrived at it, later in my life, and it doesn't have a lot of, like, how do I say it, relative emotional connectivity with me. And I feel like I sound like an elitist saying that, but it's it has its place. Like thrash metal was huge in California, and a lot of what stuck around 20, 30 years later in the respective scenes. Thrash metal's huge. Like in San Diego, it's huge. Bay Area, obviously, it's huge, and we play shows all the time with thrash metal bands. And I think for me personally, thrash metal kind of exhibits the more raw, uncompressed, wild, unabashed forms of heavy metal. Like if you're not looking for anything super melodic, you want to just like let out that raw emotion, connect with something on a more primal level. Like thrash metal is something worth listening to, and then the intricacies too, I think, like, are very important, like the heavy rhythms, the vocal phrasings. I mean, like, a lot of this stuff can't be matched anywhere else, like on a musical plane of existence. And so I kind of approach thrash metal like in that way. Like I don't listen to a lot of it, in my life nowadays, but I have a huge respect for it and for what it has done, on a international, plane.
Awesome. Well, Sebastian, I want to thank you very much for taking time to do this interview tonight.
Yeah, man. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. If we plan on releasing the independent, if we plan on releasing the digitally, at least the expanded edition shortly. So if you have an email address, or I could text you the link, so that you can check it out. It should be out pretty shortly. We're currently shopping it right now to see if anybody's willing to pick up a CD or cassette release. We have the vinyl deal with Diabolic Might, so yeah, stay put, man. We're excited, and thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem. You have any final words or thank yous, anything before we close?
Yeah, man. I want to thank right now, just a lot of the guys that believed in us in helping book the tour. We still do things very DIY on a fundamental level, and tour booking is something that I pretty much do alone. And so I'd like to thank, like, all the promoters, all the other bands that kind of like took the time to help put together some shows. On a personal level, I'd like to thank Andrew Bonzel, based out of LA, Ryan Bartlett, our artist, all of the Canadian heavy metal maniacs that we've met, like the guys in Traveler, Crom, Gatekeeper, Riot City. Those guys are awesome. A lot of the American bands we'd like to thank, or Canadians. How could I forget about Iron Kingdom? I'd like to thank all the American bands that we've kind of met along the way, like bands like Throne of Iron, Fatal Curse, Haunt, those guys are awesome. Bewitcher. Big, huge thanks to Bob and Randy, for their respective festivals. Joey Hawken in Canada. I mean, those are the guys that kind of helped bring Tzimani on a bigger stage. So we're eternally thankful for them.